Hi, everybody. I couldn't let a week go by without you being able to see my beautiful face. I'm sorry this is coming up so late. I've been pretty busy with stuff, and so I'm just now getting to the lecture. And I also wanted to think a little bit more about Coates and about where we're at as a class before I put anything down that you might be able to use against me. So, a couple of announcements. I've posted the new calendar. That calendar will take us through the end of the semester. That calendar is liable to change if depending on what happens as we go. And you'll see that I don't have quite all the readings down yet because, I like to maintain some flexibility with what we're going to be doing. Um, your commentary is due this Sunday for our workshop. I'm just trying to decide if I want to run the formal workshop through Moodle Rooms, where and I figured out what went wrong. You've got to upload your paper, and then I've got to put you into groups, and then you work within those groups. I'm trying to decide if I want to run that kind of workshop or if I want to run the open forum where people just decide on which papers they would like to comment on. If you've got an opinion on that, you should post it immediately in the hallway discussion room so that I can see that there are people who care which way we do it, and then that might influence my decision. Uh, as for the writing of the commentary, there's been a few posts in the discussion board this week on the commentary. There was only one post in the discussion board last week on the commentary. I really have no idea how people are responding to this assignment, how you're doing on it, other than those people that have posted. One of the worries that I'm having is that there's a lot of silence in the class, or a lot of people who aren't doing a lot of the work of the class. I'm worried that there's some people who are mathematically eliminating themselves from the class. It may be that you decided to mathematically eliminate yourself and you're no longer listening to me. And the only people that are listening to me right now are the ones who are still here, still care about it. And based on what I see in the discussion boards and in the in-class exam and papers that were posted, that number is getting smaller. For those of you that are still listening, stay here, stay with me. Let's get through this semester. I don't think the class is too difficult. I don't think it's going too fast. In fact, we're moving pretty slowly. And I want you to stick around, get through this part of your class, get through this requirement for taking Comp 2 so that you can move on to other classes. Um, I think what we're doing is interesting. I think the assignments are interesting. I think the readings are interesting. And based on what I've seen in the discussion boards for those that are frequently participating, um, people are getting a lot out of these assignments. If you have not jumped in, if you're not doing very much, you need to do more and be involved. Let's talk about the commentary for a couple minutes. One of the things that I saw one of our classmates post is they still aren't quite sure what a commentary is or how it's going. I want to try to demystify the concept of commentary a little bit. And we're calling it a commentary, John Trimber and myself and other people who work on the idea of commentary, as a way of kind of distinguishing the type of writing that we're doing. Now, almost anything you might see where somebody is establishing an argument, being persuasive with that argument, and writing that argument for an audience, that's a commentary. The commentaries, idea of commentary is that you are speaking to the world. You're speaking to the world a meaning that you think the world needs to know. And that goes for an academic study of the lifespan of a frog, where a scientist goes out and studies frogs and decides then to write that study up. And they want to persuade other scientists that they know something about frogs that the rest of the scientists don't. It goes for a editorial on an editorial page where somebody wants to convince us to vote for Gary Johnson, the Libertarian candidate, or Jill Stein, the Green Party candidate. It goes for the dude sitting at the end of the bar who wants to tell you why the Tigers really didn't make it this year and what kind of moves they need to go make in the offseason. Commentary is a broad concept, but the basic idea is that you are establishing a meaning that you want to pass along to your readers, to your audience. You think you have that meaning, and you think that your audience needs it. Now, in the case of written commentary, in the case of uh, a creative or academic sense of commentary, that meaning should be pretty well developed. Your plan for writing that piece, that article, or that essay should be pretty well developed. In the case of what we're doing, the idea of our commentary is that you have found a news event based on a news article. You are going to read that event, look at that event. You're going to analyze that event, and in particular, based on the readings that we've had, the readings on democracy and justice, the readings on ideas, based on the readings we've had, you are going to analyze that event through the lens of those readings. And so here's the idea of a lens. And I do this in my 131 class, more for talking about identity lenses and how we use different parts of our identity to analyze the world around us. But here's the idea of a lens of academic reading. You walk around every day through your everyday life just with your regular eyes and seeing the world through your eyes. And then one day, some teacher, some jerk, gives you a reading. They say, hey, go read this Durkheim, or hey, go read this this Dewey, or they give you Plato or Aristotle. They give you something to read, and you go and read it. And then, from that point forward, you have new lenses through which you see the world. The idea of this commentary is that you are reading this event, this thing that happened in the world, and you're going to read it through one or more of our readings that we've had for the class. And then by reading it, by analyzing it and interpreting it, you are going to develop a pattern of meaning that you want to talk about, that you think you know, that you want to share with the world. That's what you're writing. You're writing that pattern of meaning. The whole point of the paper is to establish, discuss, analyze, provide evidence for, and try to persuade your readers to accept that pattern of meaning. It sounds, when we talk about it as a commentary, like it's something brand new. It's really not. But the idea of talking about it as a commentary allows me as a teacher, or John Trimber as a teacher and a writer, to emphasize a couple of points. It allows us to emphasize the idea of interpretation, the idea of argument, and the idea of authorial voice. That when you write a commentary, you are interpreting, you are arguing, and you are paying attention to the power of your authorial voice. The idea of commentary is also not very unique. It's not very brand new. We've been writing commentaries for a long time. We could say that Plato wrote commentaries, Aristotle wrote commentaries. We could say maybe even some religious texts, very old religious texts, are commentaries on the news of the day. In American literature, commentaries have been around since the very beginning of the United States. And we can go back to Thomas Paine writing Common Sense, which it was an argument for why Americans should be pissed off at being controlled by the British. You can look at that commentary, and there's some brilliant writing in Common Sense that really try to inflame the audience to stand up and revolt against the British. We can look at Henry David Thoreau, who wrote an essay. He wrote Walden, which is itself a commentary. It's not a very easy commentary to read, but you could look at his essay Civil Disobedience. And in that essay, Henry David Thoreau makes a pretty logical case for why people shouldn't have to pay taxes. Now, he doesn't want to pay taxes, not because he doesn't want to pay taxes, but because he doesn't want to support a government that's doing things that he doesn't agree with. You could look at Jane Addams, who wrote the book Hull House, which was about helping poor and immigrant families in downtown Chicago. And she wrote this as a study of Hull House, but also as a commentary for what we should do for each other as we go through our lives. Between the World and Me, the book that we're just wrapping up, the book that I hope you enjoyed, but also that I hope inflamed you a little bit, Between the World and Me is a commentary. It's a commentary based on a news story, the the death of one of Coates's friends, and it's a commentary based on the other news stories that are happening in the world at the time that Coates is writing it, which is just a year or two ago. The ongoing killing of black men by police, the ongoing struggle to reach some sort of equality in our society. It's a commentary where Coates believes he's found a pattern of meaning, and he wants to reveal that meaning to his readers. It's a it's a fairly powerful one because Coates is not simply saying someday we're going to find our truth or someday we're going to find our salvation or find our freedom. He says you've got to make your freedom where you're sitting. Don't be a dreamer. Don't sit there and believe that someday it will happen. You've got to make it happen. And in particular, he's writing to his son as he says that. I wanted to point you to a couple of ideas about Coates, or some of his historical antecedents, the people who came before him. One of the Coates's influences is James Baldwin. I'm sorry, my brain went blank for a second. James Baldwin was an amazingly powerful writer. Baldwin's got an essay in our textbook. We're not going to read it because as much as I love it, it's pretty similar to, at least in style, to what's going on with Ta-Nehisi Coates. In fact, Ta-Nehisi Coates was influenced by James Baldwin. And this piece in particular, the piece is My Dungeon Shook, Letter to My Nephew on the 100th anniversary of the Emancipation. You could take a look at it just to see how Coates was influenced. It's a pretty powerful piece. James Baldwin was influenced by Frederick Douglass. And I suppose any person that writes about race in the United States of America is influenced by Frederick Douglass. Frederick Douglass, of course, was a slave, and he escaped, and then he became a powerful advocate for emancipation and a powerful voice for speaking out for the humanity of black people in America. Because, in 1850, up until, I guess, the last presidential debate, sometimes African Americans have not been seen as being fully people. I found the parts in Coates about the Dreamers to be particularly persuasive and meaningful. And I wanted to point you to another writer who didn't write very much commentary or very much prose. He wrote mostly poetry. That poet was Langston Hughes, who is one of my favorite all-time poets. Langston Hughes is often taught in elementary schools and junior high schools to students to show them the power, the music of poetry, or how poetry can really say something nice and meaningful about your feelings. And Langston Hughes has some very soft poems about a mother and the stairs, or about rivers. But underneath Langston Hughes's poetry, there's a fire, and the fire is a deep and abiding anger for about race relations in this country. So I want to read a couple poems to you, and then I'll wrap this up. This is Langston Hughes's poem, Democracy. Democracy will not come today, this year, nor ever, through compromise and fear. I have as much right as the other fellow has to stand on my 2 feet and own the land. I tire so of hearing people say, let things take their course, tomorrow is another day. I do not need my freedom when I'm dead. I cannot live on tomorrow's bread. Freedom is a strong seed planted in a great need. I live here too. I want freedom just as you. That's Langston Hughes's definition of democracy. That democracy is not the promise of a tomorrow. Democracy is what you grab today. I also wanted to read Hughes's poem Harlem. Uh, Langston Hughes was part of the Harlem Renaissance. He was one of the major figures of the Harlem Renaissance. That was the group of writers and artists and poets and dancers and actors and musicians in Harlem, New York, in the 1920s and 30s, who kind of revolutionized the perception of black art in America. So Langston Hughes wrote this poem called Harlem, and it's not simply a celebration of Harlem. In fact, it's barely a celebration of Harlem. Instead, it's a warning. And here's the warning. What happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun? Or fester like a sore and then run? Does it stink like rotten meat? Or crust and sugar over like a syrupy sweet? Maybe it just sags like a heavy load. Or does it explode? Langston Hughes wrote a lot about dreams, and his dreams were not the dreams deferred. His dreams were what was always taken from him or escaped him or what he just couldn't settle on. And he warns in this poem that a dream deferred might explode. We might think it turns into something else, but ultimately it explodes. Ta-Nehisi Coates' Between the World and Me is an exploration of that exploding dream. The idea that the dream could be gone. The dreamers are just fooling themselves, and that what you have to do is to make your own reality. It's a commentary of the Strong's Order, and it may be one of the most powerful commentaries written in the last few years, which is why we selected it for this section of the class, because we want to see what powerful writing can do. What can it do to change the world? When you think about issues of democracy and justice at a deep level, and you make those issues your own, you take control of them through your writing, and you persuade others that you have a meaning worth listening to. I look forward to listening to your meetings. I look forward to seeing what you do with this assignment and how you try to change the world with your patterns. Have a good week. We'll see you next week.